started since it's just about 9:30 here. So I would just like to say good morning. I'm Angie Martin, and I'm a League of Women Voter Volunteers. And you can tell us around the room, we all have silver badges here. So if you have any questions for us after the meeting, why, just go ahead and look for the silver badge. So we'd like to welcome you to this 3rd District 24 Legislative Forum being sponsored by the League in partnership with the Valley City Barnes County Development Corporation. As always, the mission of the League of Women Voters today is to facilitate the flow of accurate information to voters and to empower all citizens to actively participate in our own government. Incidentally, our local League work group welcomes new teammates all the time. Please contact one of us volunteers if you would like to help us defend democracy by empowering voters. And we should also note, even though we are the League of Women Voters, we certainly welcome men into the organization also. I'd like to note that we have printed copies in the back at the table of the hearing schedules for next week. They look like this. And the League of Women Voter information supporting one person, one vote regarding the Electoral College, which the League of Women Voters believes is outdated and disenfranchises some voters. And that brochure looks like this. And that also is on the back table. And we also advocate against all political gerrymandering. We'd also like to know at the table over there, coffee is served today if you would like to have some. So once again, we're privileged to have as our moderator today the Development Corporation's talented Director of Development, Jennifer Feist. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Angie, for your comments. Again, I'm Jennifer Feist. I'm the Economic Development Director for Valley City Barnes County. This forum will follow the similar format that you may or may not have participated in the last time. We would ask for comments from our legislators, and it's up to them if they want to stay seated or if they want to come to the podium and address the group. We would ask for comments to start us out from each one of our legislators, allowing 5 minutes for each one of you. And then we would turn to the audience for the Q&A. I think because we are deep in the session, I think to engage more in the Q&A is really important so that the legislators can hear from you and you can hear from them. So with that, I think we will move forward and ask our legislators to please talk about the things that were the activities that happened, or what's important to them, or what is coming up. So whatever your heart desires, guys, I'll leave it up to you. Looks like Representative Johnston, you're ready to go first. So take it away. Thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me? All right, my name is Dwight Johnston. I've been representing you since, this is my first session back since 2016 to 2020. First represented District 24, and it's an honor to do so. To give you an idea how many bills we have right now and where we're at, we're past crossover. We have 475 bills awaiting final action, 290 bills in committee, 191 bills that are rolled, 133 bills that have already been signed by the governor, and there are 913 amendments requested. So it's a busy time, but we're looking forward to the end of the session. And as usual, I've appreciated hearing from all of you. One thing that I've heard a lot about is property tax. There's 3 property tax bills that are in play right now. 1176, which deals with primary residence. I'm not too big of a fan of that one. It leaves a lot of people out. I've said this in one of my legislative updates. If person I rent my house from in Bismarck, she rents a few other houses, and a lot of the people that rent from her, they can't afford to buy a home, and so every time property taxes go up, she's forced to pass that cost on to them, which pushes them further away from that dream of owning their own home. So 1176 would be thrown out of the equation, and I think that's unfortunate. House Bill 1168 would be kind of a K through 12 school buy down. For a lot of people, that would be probably 50% of your property tax, and that to me would be a little bit more equitable because that would cover everybody, not just primary residents. House Bill 1575, that's still alive, and that deals with valuations. I've heard some people say that's probably the most equitable. Again, that would affect everybody. On the ESA front, we have two ESA bills. House Bill 1540, that's in the Senate right now. That leaves homeschool students out of the equation. House Bill 2400, or the Senate Bill 2400, that's in the House right now. In fact, that was just heard the other day. The way it would work is public school students would receive $500. Private school students would get anywhere from $500 to $3,500, depending on income, and that includes homeschool students. As it's written right now, I would vote against that bill. With that, I know you all have some questions, so I'll pass the mic over to Dwight. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for coming, Dwight Kiefert. I serve on the Human Services and Agriculture committees, so if you have questions on some of these other committees that we're not on, we'll have to look it up. So if you have the bill number, we almost have to look it up and read it to see what it's about too. Even inside of Human Services, we get so many bills in there that I'd have to look up the number probably too to get refreshed on what's going on with it. A couple things I wanted to share is that Human Services, we have like a $6.3 billion budget. Education is about the same. So you're looking at $13 billion just for these two committees. Total budget is like $17 billion. So there's only like $4 billion left for everything else besides Human Services and Education. And when we started out this session, there were $8 billion of requests more than there was funding. And our Constitution says we can't go, beyond what we have. But I was just kind of amazed that there was $8 billion that was being asked for that we didn't have. So that's what we had to work with. It's been pretty busy out there. We've had several days where we put in 10 hours, trying to get through all the bills and committee work and whatnot. But I know some of the school funding for the private schools was kind of an issue. But the question was asked on the floor, will this take away anything from the public schools budget? And the answer was no. So it's like any other bill. You don't have one bill taking money out of another, funding process. So whatever happens with those is not going to, affect our public schools. And other than that, we'll talk about bill you'd like to hear about. I mean, oh gosh, this is my notes for today, but we wouldn't even get enough time to read through some of the things that I brought to present, but we'll try to address what you want to find out about. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for the invitation to do this. I'm Senator Mike Wobbema. I live just a couple miles north of Valley City here, and I chair the Workforce Development Committee, and I'm also on education. Representative Johnston did a nice job covering the 90% of what I was going to say, so I won't belabor that, and we can get into the questions. But chairing workforce, mostly what we're dealing with are board bills, the board of medicine, the board of dentistry, veterinarians, those kinds of things as they clean up their language, but also working on reducing bureaucracy and improving processes to get people into the workforce and to enhance that. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with, to include a bill we just heard about having reduced credit hour requirements to get people into the workforce sooner out of the university system. There are some good points to that, there are some not so good points to that, and we're discussing that now. But those are the kinds of things that we're talking about and trying to resolve and make easier for our workforce in the state. So With that,
Okay,
I got 4 more minutes to talk.
if you want to take a
No,
photo. Yeah.
thank you very much.
Okay, I wanted to ask Representative Johnston, you mentioned after the primary residence, you mentioned another bill, and I didn't catch it before, you mentioned 1575. 1575 is
Deals with valuations.
valuations on the property taxes, and then there was something in between there I thought you mentioned.
1168.
1168, okay, thank you so much. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so we have a mic that Vicki has, and I would encourage you to be very succinct with your introductions of what you want to talk about, and then allow them time to answer your questions. So let's see who has questions.
I think the first one I saw.
Good morning, thank you for all coming. Representative Kiefert, you just mentioned in the schools, for the private schools, the public schools aren't going to be losing any money. All their programs will be intact with the money that's there. So it sounds like there must be additional money needed to fund the private schools we're talking about. Where is this money coming from, or is it coming from any other place you're taking that money away from? And also, Senator Wobbema, you're on the education, so the question will go to at least both of you.
Well, all the state has got some money, all the money comes from tax revenue, so it'd be from, one of the various tax funding. But that's the question that was asked on the floor. If anything is done, to provide some help for the private schools, it wouldn't subtract anything from, the funding for the public schools. And these other parents, there's like 8,000 students who go to private schools. Well, if you take that times 12,000, that's $96 million a year they're saving the state by not sending their kids to the public school. Then you could add another 5,500 homeschool kids to that too, but just the private schools alone, that's $96 million. So on one hand, we're saying to those parents that you're saving the state $96 million, but we don't want you to have any benefits from the taxes you pay. That's one way to look at it. But that's the question I was asked on the floor. Is it going to deduct anything from the public schools? And the answer was no. So anything else, Mike?
So the funding that would go to the non-public schools and the bills that are out there would come out of the general fund. So the money that the general fund would use to fund other things like, I don't know, I think of last session we had a $125 million grant that we were offering to a company to create fertilizer through electrolysis. That whole program is collapsed and fallen through, but that would be one example of where it would come from. We allocate it on a per pupil payment right now this year, $11,074 per pupil. That number would not change. So it seems that the thought is that that number would have to go down to $10,000 per student if we started funding non-public schools the way we should. And that's not the case. It's still going to remain at $11,074, or for the next biennium, it'll go up incrementally each year. And so that's how the money does not come out of the public schools that exist. There's the only real way that money comes out of the public schools is by student migration. And that happens all over the place anyway. I mean, there's been, since 2020, there's been a 40% increase in homeschoolers. Those students have migrated from the public school systems. So to use the argument that it's taking money away from the public schools, you would say then that we need to put a lockdown on homeschoolers leaving the public school system. We can't do that. We're taking money away from the public schools. That's the same argument. It doesn't hold water. So between student migration and students choosing to do other things into this already, that's impacting the public school funding. But it's not done by reducing the per pupil payment. And I think that's a confusion that people seem to have.
So it won't reduce the per pupil payment, but it easily could reduce the head count. And for every student who chooses to go to a private school, the public school would lose the $11,000 per student that you just mentioned. Is that correct?
That's right. So in other words, the 40% increase of people that have decided to homeschool instead of stay in the public school system, regardless of the bills that we have in front of us, have already reduced that. So that's just going to happen. Student migration is going to happen. People moving to the urban areas are going to reduce the number of students in the rural areas. Jobs are going to pull people away into a different state, or bring people into the state, because it comes both ways. People, we have some school districts out there that are growing like gangbusters, and so they are gaining because of increased student loan. So it's just headcount.
Yes, okay. And then I'm going to follow up here. I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and follow up with a couple of other questions. The bill calls for funds to be granted to students until a student graduates from high school or reaches 21 years of age, regardless of household income. An eligible use of funds is tuition and fees as at an eligible post-secondary institution. So these funds will follow the student and through if they go to a 2-year school, or at least until they're 21, as long as they're in school. And the price tag is $40 million for the current for the 26-27 biennium. I hope I have the numbers right, and $80 million for 27-29 biennium. So that's $120 million. In addition to that, DPI, Department of Public Instruction, may not regulate the educational program of a participating non-public school or education service provider. And in addition, participating non-public schools and education service providers must have the freedom to provide for the educational needs of the school students without governmental control. So there was a lot of conversation about accountability. What are your thoughts about the accountability piece? And rather than the $11,000 per student, I'm just curious what kind of financial support will the state provide to the public schools for construction projects?
Well, there's a curveball. Construction projects are really completely outside the scope of the original question. So let's come back to the construction in a few minutes.
Let's come back to construction. Thank you.
Okay, so just to keep things in context, you talked about 120 million. Now remember, that's 120 million over the next 4 years. And really the next year, the next biennium is 40 million, because the program will require some time to be, assuming the bill passes, of course, but the program will require a little time to develop and put flesh on the bone and create it. So it probably won't be until the second school year of this next biennium that the program will be put in place. It'll just take some time to create all of the processes and procedures that would be required to do that. And so then the $80 million is in the next biennium. That's anticipated what the next biennium, the 27, 29 will require. So just let's keep that perspective. So then, I'm sorry, I'm explaining that piece.
The second part of my question was relative to $120 million, or whatever that number might be, to assist public schools with construction funds, because this school district, along with many others, are in dire need of construction funds.
Yeah, but there was one other aspect of your...
It was about the governing of the funds and the accountability side.
Oh, the accountability piece. Okay, so here's the hard truth of accountability. Our public school systems are accountable by open meeting laws and those kinds of things, and that, I understand, is a concern for people. But really, when you think about accountability, our students currently in reading and math are in roughly the 40th percentile of proficiency. So you would think we would want accountability to improve that proficiency. But what really happens? We keep doing the tests. The tests keep fluctuating between 40 and 44, 38. I'm looking at a reading here that the highest percentage in the state of North Dakota in the 4th grade since 2013 was 36.8 above proficiency in the reading in the 4th grade. But yet, we continue to pay our public schools on a per pupil payment based on population without regard to any of those scores. So where's the accountability there? If you're talking about money being taken from one to the other, and you're talking about accountability in that aspect, where's that accountability? What we do in the public school system, if the school is doing really poorly, we give them more money to improve the program. And if they continue to perform poorly, we give them even more money in kind of a probation kind of scenario to get better. And the funds continue. So where's that particular accountability? Whereas on the non-public school side, if the parents are taking not $11,400, but $4,000 and putting it into the school system, the non-public school system that they would be using, and their kids performed in the 40th percentile, what would the parents do? They would say, you guys are terrible, we're leaving. That's true accountability, because they wouldn't be able to stay operational in the marketplace. That's true accountability. So we can peel the layers of the onion back and ask and talk about this aspect of accountability or that aspect of accountability, but truly accountability covers a broad spectrum. But mostly people try to tie this to funding and financial. And so so that's, to me, the accountability problem is not based on funding non-public schools or funding public schools. We need to make better improvements. Now, we are doing some things and have done some things in the legislature, science of reading. Hopefully that will adjust how our students are taught reading to improve those scores as time goes on. That's just been implemented in the last biennium, and so that's becoming, that's a working process, and we'll see how that improves. And the same thing with science and math. We're doing the same thing with science and math. Our scores are roughly equal. Science and math is a little better than, our math scores are better than the reading scores, but that's where the accountability piece comes in. Now, with regard to construction.
Can I comment one thing
Yes.
about that, Senator?
Absolutely.
Maybe you can help me understand this. In a press release dated January 29, 2025, Superintendent Kirsten Baszler stated that North Dakota students outperformed national averages in math in the newest results from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, that's NEAP. I think if there's educators here, they know what I'm talking about. The 4th grade math, only 5 states had higher average scores than North Dakota, and only 6 states had higher average scores in 8th grade math. So how does that compare, and what's your response to that in terms of how well public schools are educating our students?
All I can do is look at this information provided by Superintendent Baszler, that the average score in 2022 for 4th grade math was 217.53. I think that's based on a scale of 500.
I think we're referencing, I recognize those numbers,
Okay.
we're referencing.
So yes, we're better
the
in
same-
North Dakota by 1.42 points.
Yeah, but
So is that really better?
the position among the states, you and I are looking at the same data. You're referencing the scores, I'm referencing our position
Right.
among the 50 states. So I think you and I are using the same information a little bit differently. Let's move on to the construction piece.
Well, you asked the question, so I'm just trying to respond to it.
Okay, thank you. Can you respond to the construction side, please?
Now, in the last couple of bienniums, we've increased funding for the School Construction Assistance Loan Revolving Loan Fund. It's called SCALF, just because we like to make acronyms. So I think we increased it by $50 million last biennium. I know there was some discussion about increasing it again this year. And what that fund is we're taking money out of, probably out of oil revenue earnings and putting it in this fund to let it grow. And then from there, school districts can borrow from that fund for construction, repairs, whatever they need to use it for. And when they repay that loan back, it goes back into that revolving fund, so that fund continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I believe we're adding more money this session, but I haven't heard any discussion on it, so I'm not absolutely certain on that. But each time that we do that, then that money goes. Of course, with 168-ish, I keep hearing different numbers, school districts out there, of course, there's a lot of competition for those funds, and a $50 million increase doesn't last very long, but those are the kinds of things that exist out there to help schools do these construction-related things, short of the bonding that would be required for major construction issues. I think Representative Johnston had a comment, or did you, Dan, or you were waving?
All in or stuff.
Might be easier just to move the mic back and forth, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on that too. That's one of two areas you asked me to check into. And I did visit with the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and he said that the chances of like us getting funding, they can't provide funds for new schools for the whole state. That just isn't gonna happen. And then he reminded me that we're $8 billion with over requests already. So it just wasn't going to happen at all. The other thing you wanted me to check into, if I can share about it, was infrastructure for natural gas.
Yeah.
And this was to help get it on South 94. It went through the Energy and Natural Resources with a unanimous do pass. Okay, then it comes to the floor, and the appropriation guy gets up and says that we don't have enough pipelines to do this. That's like it's ahead of its time. If that's true, I don't know, but it's frustrating when somebody throws something at one of your bills, you don't even know if it's true or not, and it gets defeated.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if that didn't happen on this, because there should be adequate natural gas, you would think, to, you know, provide more to more homes and whatnot, but not knowing that, how do you argue it on the floor? But it did get a unanimous pass out of committee.
Okay, thank you for that. Representative Johnston.
Yeah, if I could go back to the proficiency scores. Back when I ran the first time, Common Core was kind of the hot topic. And I think every state, almost every state in the Union shares one thing in common. They all adopted Common Core sight unseen and implemented it. And since then, we've seen test scores across the board go down. And you know, our DPI has actually bragged about the fact that we're like 1.5% higher than some other states, which is pathetic. I mean, if I can read Valley City fourth grade math, 49% proficiency. This is in 23-24. Fourth grade reading, 44%. Fourth grade science, 44%. Eighth grade math, 49%. Eighth grade reading, 49%. Eighth grade science, 54%. If I go down to, if we find it, Litchfield, Marion. All right. Litchfield, Marion, fourth grade math, 34.5%. Fourth grade reading, 34.5%. Fourth grade science, 20%. So, to go back to what Mike said about accountability, where is the accountability? You know, this is going through the legislature right now, these scores that were just provided by DPI. And again, DPI brags about these scores. 30-something% proficiency. So what are we doing wrong? Do we dump more money into the system? And that's what we keep doing every biennium. You got to ask yourself, for a student that's down in Litchfield, Marion, what options do they have? If you're a poor student, you have a poor family, and you're stuck in a school that has a 30% proficiency rating, what do they do? So I do see the argument for some of these ESAs. I get the reason. This is about making the market more competitive. But with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, so we've got lots of questions.
Yeah, can I follow the ones that I've,
Let's start, Vicki, we're going to start right up front here.
well, yeah, because she's on topic, but this gentleman is in queue, and he said, go ahead and stick with the topic. But I saw this hand first, after him.
Thank you. Just one more statistic that was not shared. Only 6 states performed higher than North Dakota Public Schools at grade 4 reading as well. So I know you may not be excited about the percentages, but compared to other states, we are still doing well. I just need to talk about the vouchers some more. One of the major problems I have with them is giving public money to private schools who make their own rules. They do not have to educate everyone. They can tell students, you do not belong here. You have too many special needs, you can't stay here. And I'm not saying every private school does this, but they have this is the accountability piece I'm afraid of, is what's going to hold those private schools accountable to take care of all students. Public schools, we take everyone with open arms, and we take care of them, and we love them, and we give them the best that we can. We don't kick students out because of their abilities, but I know private schools do. I do have a couple more things I just have to touch on that have already been spoken about. I know you say that we're not taking money out of public schools for private schools. Originally, there was going to be a 4% and a 4% increase. Right now, the bill that's going through says 2% and 2%. So in my mind, that money was taken out of public schools, and where is it going? Why isn't it back at the 4% and the 4%?
Okay, I'll comment to your first aspect first. You're aware that there's a private school in Fargo that takes special needs kids. That's all they do, right? There is a private school in Fargo that does that. The market will bear that. Once we transition, of course, and I understand the concern people have about addressing kids with special needs. And in testimony, we listened to a few schools talk about we do not turn those students away. We try to work with them. But the thing about choice is parents choose where their kids are best going to learn in the academic environment that best suits them. So if they have a child in that situation, they're not going to choose that school because it wouldn't best suit their child's needs. But again, I think once we start down this road, because then there will be funding available to create these organizations that can take on these children, then we will start to see those kinds of doors open up for children with those kinds of concerns and educational challenges that will take place. But it takes time, just like any new market. It takes time for the market to grow and fill in the needs of the consumer. And so I think that will be the case. So I think certainly now, today, that's a concern, and I understand it. But there's no good solution to that in this discussion at this point. But as time goes on, it will evolve.
And I know you talked about, Fargo has that option, but like 32% of counties have no access to private schools. So this isn't helping every student in the state as being advertised. Only 32% of counties have access to private schools.
Understood. Okay, so I'm not sure how long you and I are going to have this dialogue at the expense of everybody else's questions, but again, in the rural areas, for those schools, instead of schools closing, if the private school opportunity becomes an option and funding becomes available to open doors for private schools, I believe in the rural communities, there will be private schools that will open their doors to keep the school in the community. Because we all know, or at least we all believe, that once the school leaves the community starts to wither and die. And I think with resources we made available to open those doors for private schools in those rural communities, we'll see some of those communities continue to have open doors for schools, but they'll be non-public. So I think, but again, the market needs to evolve, and those opportunities need to have a chance to grow. And until we put resources to that, it won't happen. So, and then,
I just worry about like the number of teachers that are going to be retained and where are all these extra teachers coming from?
Well, again, if a school is closing in a rural area, the teachers are already there. The chances are they may migrate. But the second part of your question, it escaped me a second. 4% down to 2%. that is not a function of taking money from the public schools and putting it in private schools, because currently, private schools don't, I mean, the funding for private schools doesn't, or non-public schools, does not exist yet. So to say that that money's coming out and going into non-public schools, that's a specious argument, because it doesn't exist yet. The reason it went from 4 to 2% is, as Representative Kiefert said, there was an $8 billion disparity that we needed to bring down to zero. So it's a loss as a result of the overall total state budget discussion.
Okay, we're gonna, Vicki, you have the next person right there.
Another question, yeah.
Another question?
My heart to get in order.
Representative Johnston, you mentioned Litchfield Marion's numbers. Do you have numbers for like Oak Grove or other private schools?
Well, I think you can get them, but we're kind of concentrating on our district.
Okay. I was just wondering, because I mean, we're talking about potentially private schools raising the percentages. Just wondering about that. The other thing is that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's not so much the argument that private schools will raise the percentages as giving parents the opportunity to get their children in an academic environment that better suits them under those circumstances.
Okay. The other thing about a small school is, I don't know how many fourth graders in Litchfield Marion, do you have that number? But I mean, if you have just a few kids that have, struggle in school in a small school district, that can really, drop that overall number.
Right.
So that's all I was going to comment on.
Okay, next question
Vicki, you
then.
want to give this to?
You're done? Okay.
Okay, I was an educator for 43 years. I'm recently retired. I also was the testing coordinator. And I will tell you, you are given this state test and you have a couple-week window to give this state test. And you have to schedule everyone onto the computers and do that. And I'll tell you, we looked very carefully at every subcategory. Like, we found out that on the state test, that our students weren't scoring as high in evaluating nonfiction. So we worked really hard on increasing that nonfiction. And our numbers came way up in that category because we did that. The public schools are doing that, but we are testing everyone. We are held accountable to test everyone. The private schools do not have to do all this stuff. We have a high number of special needs kids, and they can bring our numbers down. They may not qualify for an IEP, but they still are struggling students. And in a small school, like he mentioned, your numbers really are skewed. Your percentages are really skewed if you have a class that has, they're in 4th or 8th grade at that time. There's times where our students we were testing a group of high-achieving students. So you had 20 kids, and they were good students. Our numbers in 4th grade were really high that year. And then the next year, you have a class of 13 kids, and 4 of them really are struggling students. Your 4th grade numbers look horrible that year. It does not mean you're not educating the kids. And then Mr. Kiefert brought up about the fact that these private schools are saving the school district money because they're educating their own kids. They're not saving the school district a dime. They're taking $11,000 away from the school districts for everyone that does not attend those public schools. And our kids have no choice. We're in rural Barnes County, and they have no choice unless they're privately going to drive their children to the 25 kids that go to the 2 private schools in Valley City, 30 kids that go to the 2 private schools in Valley City. That's not making it available, and they can turn them down.
So do you have a question, or you're just wanting them to understand your perspective?
I did have my question is, how can you say how can you justify the money for that much money for the 7% that attend private schools? How can you justify $40 million and $80 million down the road for 7% of our students? I just don't see it, because I did the numbers and it's like they're getting more than the public schools are getting per student. And then they don't have to be accountable to you? They don't have to take those state tests?
Okay, so if you would like to try and answer that question?
I don't
The
need-
justification.
I don't need to try, I can answer that question. Over the past several decades, we've had, actually, when was it, mid-'80s, I think, that homeschooling became 90s. But since private schools have been in operation, and since homeschool's been in operation, the state has had zero, I view it from a return on investment and investment in our children situation. We've had those students that have not been in the public schools, that have been educated outside of the public schools, have had zero investment from the state put into them. And yet the state has reaped the benefit of that lack of investment in the economic impact that those students have had on the state of North Dakota over time, the cultural and social impact that the state of North Dakota has reaped the benefit of over time with zero investment. It's time that we invest in our children. At this point in time, if you want, it's not the school district that saves money. It's the state that has saved that money with those children not going to public school. So that's just a nuance. But the state needs to recognize that they are reaping a benefit with zero investment, and it's time, in my opinion, that we start investing in all of our children in the state of North Dakota. So there's my response to that.
I just want to encourage everybody to keep your hands up, because I'm keeping you in sequence. And
Any other additional comments from,
don't be shy.
You know, that comment about that private schools are costing the state $12,000 a year by not taking their kids. Well, there's no funding allocation for money that's not spent or not needed. I mean, if you threw in the homeschoolers too, it'd be 13,500 students times 12,000. That's not being allocated or not needed. So you could say that they could receive more money if all these people, you know, sent their kids there. Well, that's not costing the state money at this point.
Okay.
next
I know there's a
question?
question here.
Next question.
My question is related to the surveys that have been done in the state of North Dakota representing us as North Dakotans. And the surveys do not show that the people of North Dakota support putting money into private schools, public money into private schools. Secondly, I'd like to just reiterate what you said. We need accountability. Are there standards? Do private schools have to follow the same standards? Are they written down? What about the curriculum? Third point, curriculum. Could be a religious curriculum. Do I want my tax dollars to go to pay for a religious curriculum or some other curriculum that I don't know about to educate the students in North Dakota? Thank you.
All non-public schools need to be approved by the state of North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. So they do have oversight in that aspect of it. So they're all approved. So the DPI has looked at and approved all public, non-public schools that are out there. As far as the curriculum is concerned, they don't dive into who's teaching what curriculum. But it's not, the funds go to the parents in support of the children, or actually go to the child, but the parents determine where they go. So the state is not driving any particular school course curriculum. So, well, you're pointing at yourself saying my tax money, but the parents are taxpayers as well. So that same argument goes on both sides of the coin. So I think that accountability aspect that doesn't work here.
Another question?
Well, with these education savings accounts, one of the things that I want to just remind you is that there are a variety of needs in our students, as was said earlier, And public education is there for all students in our state. And as public servants, I think that part of your job would be to strengthen that public education system. And I feel like these private education, or these education savings accounts for private schools are building an incentive. I don't look at the school system as a market or our children as a market. I look at the children as all the children in our state deserve a good education, and that's what our public education system should be doing, and that's what I think you should be helping to strengthen.
I'm in violent agreement with you that all students need to have the opportunity to get education. So we're in complete agreement, all students. What we disagree on is how we go about doing that. The other aspect of, according, in response to Ms. Booher earlier, is North Dakota is the only state in the union that requires teachers in non-public schools to be certified at teaching degrees and be licensed. We're the only state in the union that does that. We do have some oversight and control over how education is being done, both on the public and the non-public side. And even for homeschoolers, there's a requirement that you need to either have a diploma, high school diploma or a GED, or if you don't, you have to be under the observation and oversight of a certified teacher. So we do provide more oversight than virtually any other state in this union.
So you have to be a homeschool, I want to make sure I just heard you. If you homeschool children, you are required to have a high school diploma or a GED.
That's correct.
Okay, and then oversight from?
If you're, I'm a little fuzzy on all of the specific details that Dan would know better maybe.
I just want to make sure I heard.
But if you don't have those, then you need to be under the oversight of a public or of a licensed teacher in order to make sure that your children have access to the appropriate education.
High school diploma and GED oversight. Okay,
Another
next
question.
question.
I think the next one is
Yes, I kind of, just a little bit to add to what she was saying. I'm a little concerned that it seems like we're celebrating that we're pushing kids off of the public dollar to get them into private schools to save the state millions of dollars. What's really happening is that I'm a teacher in a public school and I have 3 daughters in a public school. And as kids are leaving our district, my kids' education is suffering. Every time 5 kids leave the district, that $12,000 goes with them, and we cut art, and we cut a business teacher, and we cut a science teacher, and we cut an English teacher, and class sizes go up. And then we wonder, gosh, why isn't testing going well? As a high school teacher, I can tell you there is a vast difference between a room full of 20 kids and a room full of 28. And we're going to see outcomes suffer, and I don't know what the push is as Valley City, as people who represent Valley City, and the vast majority of our students go to public schools, why we want to make education harder for our kids. Why we're trying to, I don't know, it seems like you're trying to tear down our public schools by encouraging kids to find other options. My kid doesn't have another option because I don't agree with the ideology of the other the other private schools in my community, and I'm not going to homeschool even though I would be very capable of it, because I think my students gain so much by being in a school with students of a variety of abilities and a variety of diverse experiences. That's giving them an education they're not going to get anywhere else.
So what is your question? I mean,
I guess I'm
push. What's the push?
What's the push? Why are we trying? Because you represent Valley City, and we don't have a lot of non-public options. Are you trying to, bring in? This is not a public market. What's the push to do this to our kids?
The push is to bring all of the children in the state of North Dakota under the umbrella of being supported by the state of North Dakota for education. It's not a push to push kids out of the schools. It's to give the parents the opportunity to make better choices, or choices that are better appropriate for their child's education. And so it's just expanding the umbrella, not keeping the umbrella the same size and pushing kids out from under it.
I guess the question to that might be, well then, who is responsible for paying for that choice? So next question.
Just a point, going back to Litchfield, Marion, and when you're a small school teacher, it's the luck of the draw. And you end up in a situation where if you have a percentage of lower achieving students, that teacher that has a very poor score that year, it may be the best job they ever did teaching in their career, but it could be the worst year for results and numbers. And again, that's just the luck of the draw. My concern is with the voucher situation, and I'd like your input on this, but when you look at the North Dakota Century Code, it very specifically says that public funds cannot be used for sectarian schools, and it's irrevocable unless there is by the vote of the people in North Dakota. And I understand where you're coming from, but does the Century Code need to be changed to really do this, or are you asking for some legal challenges if you put in the vouchers?
What you just described was the Blaine Amendment, and the Blaine Amendment has been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and we've got a statement, I'm not sure what the right terminology is, from the Attorney General stating the same, that aspect of our Constitution is unconstitutional and not defendable in court.
Okay.
So then the question then would be, is it time for the people of North Dakota to whether they support
Well, I don't think anybody is fooling themselves to think that if we decide to put, and they're not vouchers, by the way. Educational savings accounts are not vouchers. Vouchers are different.
Right. So can we, go ahead, I'm sorry.
But we're, in the legislature, we're not kidding ourselves that if we are successful in passing a piece of legislation that opens up the doors a little bit wider for education support for our students, that there may be a challenge at the ballot box. And that's what the initiative measure process is all about. So we fully are aware of that, but I think there's just a lot of us that would feel that this is an important step to make.
Okay. And then I've got a question over here. He's had his hand up for quite some time. Yeah, go ahead.
Senator Wobbema, Representative Kiefert, Representative Johnston. My name is Dan Larson. I represent Maple Valley School. And we're talking about the difference spending for students in private schools. I represent a rural North Dakota school. I feel like we do a fantastic job. I've also been part of Valley City Schools. My daughter and my son are part of the school system as well. I don't understand the 2% and the 2% thing. Let's get back to that, because if money is going to be put into schools, right now my district would be gaining $53,000 approximately with that formula. I'm facing 15% insurance costs. I got salary raises. I'm trying to attract teachers into my district. I have to replace my 10-year-old buses. How can I do that at $53,000?
You can't. You know that, I know that. I'm not in agreement on 2 and 2. That currently is a function of appropriations at this point in time. And we do have a really strong advocate on the Senate side for school systems, Senator John Shively. He's in the Mott area, and he's really our education guru in the Senate. But I suspect that we may see that bump up. But again, it's a function of we have so many dollars, and we got to get them. We got to be able to get the rope around the tree and get it tied at the end. So I'm hopeful that 2 and 2 is not going to hold. I don't know that 4 and 4 will hold, but if we can increase that to some extent, I think that would help. Because just from an inflationary aspect at all, we know that 2% doesn't even get you to where you were 2 years ago. So I recognize that. I think we as a Senate recognize that. But the reality is the level of funding we have available to spend on the things that are in the conflict, and the challenges of who wins those arm wrestling fights. That's why I stayed in education this whole time, to try to help support those kind of things. But I think I'm hopeful that we'll see it increase from 2 to 2. So I'm with you on that. That's not a good place to be.
Question over here then.
Yes, I want to thank you all for your time here. Thank you. I'll kind of speak on the other side. I want to thank all the educators in this room for all their hard work. And I actually was in private education for 30 years as a teacher, and then a principal, and I can tell you that we dealt with all kinds of children who had learning disabilities, IEPs. We struggled through with them in a variety of ways and helped them struggle with them in a great deal of ways. There are probably at least 100, if not more, kids here in Valley City who, through the 2 private schools in town and through homeschooling, their parents have chosen not to use the public schools. And I just want to thank you for kind of standing up for fairness, because you know they're being taxed one way, but then they're being taxed another way, and taking care of their children, taking care of paying doubly for other kids and then themselves. And so I want to thank you for some fairness. And I would just ask that you would maybe talk about the idea of fairness versus a monopoly on education.
I've got one thought that I'm not in the middle of this argument. I'm on ag and human services, so I don't hear all the testimony. But I do have taxpayers from our state that have contacted me and said that they'd like to have some help with their kid going to private school. They say my neighbor, he sends their kids to the public school, and they're happy to get 12 grand from the state. Part of that's my money, but they're okay with that. But when I ask for a little bit of that to help fund my child's education, it's totally no-go. And we try to come up with compromises with people here, the pros and cons. Well, I just didn't know how to answer this guy. He's saying his neighbor's okay taking his money for his kid, but I am not allowed anything to help me if I want to send my kid to a different school. And I hate to comment on it too much, but like this district, I've had parents contact me that have special needs children, and they're sending them elsewhere. I don't want to say where they're going, but it seems like there's some schools in our district that do a lot better job handling these students. But they didn't feel they were being fairly treated, and they sent their kids elsewhere. But I hate to get into much detail about it, but that's what I hear from people is that my neighbor's okay taking my money, that's fine. What about me? I pay taxes, property tax, income tax, sales tax, everything, but I'm not allowed a penny to help me educate my own kids the way I want to. So that's what I've been hearing, and I didn't really have a good answer for it.
Daniel, did you have anything more to add, or has it all been said?
I think in our country right now, the hot topic is choice. President Trump says he wants it, our governor says he wants it, and our legislature seems open to it, and that's because of the people of North Dakota. I keep hearing about these surveys. But I haven't seen a source for those surveys yet. But at the end of the day, competition breeds excellence in almost every aspect of our life. And again, if you're a poor family and you're taking your child and you're putting them through a private school or what have you, that poor family is still paying K through 12 taxes. They're still paying for the public school system, and they're taxpayers. Why shouldn't they get some of that money?
So we are 1 hour in on our legislative forum. We're scheduled to be done by 11 o'clock, and we've spent the entire time talking about education. You can see how passionate people are.
Can we do 2 more? I'm aware of 2
Two
more.
very quickly, and then I want to move on to other topics, because there are other topics that are very important.
And I have a gentleman.
And I think property taxes are probably next on the list somewhere in this audience.
I don't know what his topic is, but I have a gentleman who's been waiting, and he said, stay on topic. He was very gracious. Next.
Well, a couple things, but I'd like to make a comment first of all, and put a plug in for the public schools in this district. And I think that carries over statewide. My wife spent her entire career in a small public school. We've been members of this district for nearly 50 years. And I can tell you, we do very well. You can talk about surveys, you can talk about all of these issues. We are fortunate to have some very good public schools in this district. The other comment I want to make is We're not talking about the availability of funds. I served 30-some years on the Appropriations Committee, and we had good years and we had tough years. We had years where there's absolutely no money available. And we had an allotment, and an allotment is where the governor had to take money away from public education, away from the other agencies. That can happen, and it will happen. Our budget is strong now. Guarantee you, that can change in 2 years, 4 years, but it will change. And then what are we going to do? We're taking on a new program, a new commitment here, at a time when Washington is cutting back all over the place. We have no idea how much support we're going to have from Washington. I think it's safe to say likely less. So I think we got to be careful. The budget is not something that can grow and grow and grow. I was in the Senate Appropriations Committee in 17 when we had to reduce higher education by about 400 employees statewide. Many of those were research folks at the universities with tenure, with years of institutional knowledge, and when they went to Iowa State, they went to Ohio State, they took millions of dollars of grants with them. So, you know, we got to be careful. There was a time when we struggled trying to come up with a $10 million general fund budget. One last comment. If this private school fund goes through, I'll guarantee you, because I was out there, and every session they were knocking at the door. You're going to have higher education institutions knocking at the door next session. There are 5 Native American private schools. We've got the University of Mary, Jamestown, Rasmussen College, we got Ellendale, and then we got a handful of hairstylist colleges and vocational schools, so on. All of them will be at the door. So we're not going to be talking 40 million or 80 million. That's going to explode. And if we support this package, it's going to be very hard pressed for the legislature not to support higher education.
So Larry, do you have a question then, or just making them aware that there is more down?
It's a statement. We have to be very, very careful.
Very careful, okay.
And we're treading on new waters.
Okay, one more, and we're going to move on to a different topic. One more.
This gentleman's been waiting quite a while.
Thank you. I'm Reverend Dwayne Coates, and I pastor Epworth United Methodist Church here in Valley City. United Methodist Church has a long and strong history of supporting public education. For as much as we want to advance our mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, we don't want state money to help us do that. I might have this wrong, but I think it's because we don't want the king's money, because as two of you have said, that comes with oversight and control. And I believe that this country was founded in part because we did not want the king to be the head of our religion. We didn't want the government to tell us what to believe or how to practice worship or even how to practice discipleship. So I have 3 questions, 2 of which is seeking to understand your positions, and the other is a curiosity. So help me understand, Representative Johnston and Senator Wobbema. It seems as though you believe that there is a compelling state interest in taking state money from other state programs in order to fund non-public schools. And it seems as though you have said that the Blaine Amendment is unconstitutional. The North Dakota Supreme Court has said that. And I'm wondering, is that a legislative thing or is that a constitutional thing? Because if it's constitutional, then it seems that the Supreme Court has said that there are certain parts of the Constitution that are more important than others. So it seems as though you believe that the best option to improve the state education program would be to take this money out of other programs and use it to advance sectarian interest. So my 2 questions: do I understand your position and the position of the Supreme Court correctly? And the curiosity is, what other ideas did you consider that you found to be inferior to using public funds to advance a sectarian interest?
Yeah, it's not, as Mike said, it's not the state Supreme Court. This was the U.S. Supreme Court, the Dwight Amendment. And I think that might have been around the school system in Montana. I think that's where the decision is correct. It was a private school that was getting public money from the state. And that's where the Dwight Amendment came about. Yeah, of course I'm for taking away some money from other entities in our state. How many of you believe that we should keep funding PBS?
Funding what?
PBS.
PBS?
Prairie Broadcasting. Okay, that's $6 million of state money in the biennium. Okay, this is an organization that's running with a $32 million operating budget. They don't need state money. Why are we funding them? If we're picking on things here, we have a ton of things like this that we give money away to. I mean, I'm not going to start picking on some of these individual things, but it's astonishing what we waste money on as a state. So if we're really serious about the things we want to fund, then we got to start being more meticulous about what we spend millions of dollars on. And PBS, that's a good start.
I think these proposals too, I'm not in the middle of it, but none of these proposals are to send money directly to the private schools. I don't believe it's for the parents to be able to save up some of their own money to help them have a choice where they want to go. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think that any of the funding is going directly to public or private schools.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's going to parents, not sectarian. Parents choose where the funding will go to cover their children's education. If it was sectarian, that would be a voucher program, and the funds would go directly to the school from the state, and that's not what we're doing. The funds will be used for not just tuition in private school, but there are other educational related items that parents can utilize the funds for as well in support of the educational needs of their children. So it's much broader than that. But again, yes, not the North Dakota Supreme Court state. So.
We have a question over here.
Is it on the new, do you want a new topic or do you want more on air?
Hold on, Vicki, please.
Hasn't answered the third question. What other ideas would you consider that becoming inferior to this in your compelling statements for improving education?
We have been working from the public school perspective to make improvements for a very long time. But to me, it's not a case of other choices to improve the school system. This is to provide the opportunity of. So I haven't really pursued other options. What I'm trying to do is to give parents the ability to have the decision process and give them the option, because we provide some resources so that they can make the best choice for the best educational environment for their child, and to include all children in the state of North Dakota in support of this. So it's a little bit of a nuance. It's not from the perspective of improving education per se. It's just providing parents the ability to select where their kid can get educated in the best manner possible.
Okay.
Why use the argument we used earlier about the improving of test scores? It seems like you're saying there's compelling state interest to improve education.
No, the compelling state interest is to give parents the ability to have the choice of where their kids go to the best outcome for their child. And we keep hearing back to us that the public schools and accountability is the only choice that's considered. And so just using as an example for accountability the test scores and continuing to fund education at the levels that they've always been funded at, in answer to, is there really accountability? So that's where the difference is.
Okay, so we're going to move on to another topic, and I'm going to pick property taxes. There's got to be a question out there about property taxes.
I've been waiting a long time.
Okay, go ahead.
Not on property tax either.
Okay, go ahead.
1408 for Senator Wobbema, because it's non-descendant. House Bill 1408.
annual
Would
session.
you take the mic, Vicki? He's trying to ask a question. Will you take the mic over?
I apologize, we have a gentleman who wanted to offer a correction, Jennifer. I don't know how
Okay,
you
we'll
want to
come
handle
back to him.
Okay,
in a
thank
minute.
you.
Let's
Thank
go to
you.
Tom.
Who did I miss? Thomas.
The question is for Senator Wobbema, because House Bill 1408 is on the Senate. How do you feel about 1408 annual sessions? I'm in for them because the budget, as you said, is of $7 billion approximately a year. Needs to be annually fine-tuned like any business would. Federal budget cuts are coming, as has been stated, and that's going to have to be dealt with one way or another. And thirdly, with annual sessions, more people would be allowed to run for the legislature because, with all due respect to the panel members, there's very few people that can run for the legislature now with biannual sessions. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we have a correction over there.
You ready for that?
Yes, we're ready for the correction.
Okay, doke. And then I know we have a question on a new topic over in the middle.
Okay.
Yes, the my understanding is the U.S. Supreme Court of Montana ruled that the interpretation of the Lane Amendment was wrong. And this is this would take a long time to discuss fully. But if that provision of the North Dakota Constitution is illegal, then you run into the problem as North Dakota a state because it's part of the contract of making North Dakota a state.
Just to clarify and go back to the previous question on 1408, when that was in the House, I voted in favor of it, and that might seem odd from my perspective, but it wasn't in an attempt to grow government. What 1408 attempts to do is be a more reactive or a more responsive legislature. As you know, we're allowed 80 days in the biennium. 1408 would send this to the people for a vote, and it would just divide that 80 days up annually, so you'd have about a 40-day session annually. And you're right, you wouldn't have to be away from your full-time job as long. It would open it up in that regard. It would make us a more diverse legislature, I think. It would also make us more responsive to some of the ongoing changes. I think right now it's really tough to go every 2 years as a legislature, and there's a lot of stuff that can happen in that 2-year period. So yeah, that's a couple of the reasons why I was in favor of 1408, not an attempt to grow government, but to be more responsive to people in North Dakota.
New question.
New question. Hi, my name is Anita Tulp. I think most of you probably know me as the librarian, the director of the Valley City Barnes County Public Library. And when I took this job, I promised the people of Valley City and Barnes County that I would be here to serve them to the best of my ability, and that means standing up and saying my piece. So I want to represent everybody here. I know there's concerns. I have to commend Representative Johnston for, in his podcast with Steve Ernest, he at least put some kind of definition on the obscene material that SB 2307 talks about. When he said, we take our kids into a gas station or convenience store, some of the magazines are covered. They're covered for a reason, and that's because they are not allowed to be displayed so that children view the obscene material. I can assure you that our library, and probably no other library in North Dakota, ever purchases, subscribes to, or would even accept as a donation any material that comes in a brown wrapper. So we do not have that kind of material in our library and never ever will. We do have all of our materials in age-appropriate places. We go by what is recommended for those books through the reviews that we get from established book places that give these materials to us.
Do you have a question for them? Do you have a question for them? Okay, thank you.
We protect our children the best way we can. I'm very upset with Mr. Wobbema. Nefarious? Really? You think there are
librarians out there that have nefarious intentions against our children. Have you seen the front page of the Fargo Forum yesterday? We know that that's very nefarious. And you'll never find a librarian, you can't find a librarian that has had front page news on that subject. So a lot of this is lies, and the lies are being perpetuated even through some of our leadership. And if you go and just Google librarians and sexual crimes against children, you're not going to come up with any examples of that. You'll come up with examples of state after state legislating against librarians and libraries for the reason that is just not, doesn't even exist. Kids are not getting porn from the library. People have the opportunity to reject material. Isn't there a better way that you can do this? I mean, maybe we need some parenting classes on how to teach our children to be responsible readers. After all, we have hunter safety at the age of 10. So you can do that. And I know you don't like ALA either because, you know, that helps us, that supports us as librarians, but if somebody came to take your guns away, NRA would be right here to help you too.
Ma'am, what was on the front page of the Fargo Forum?
I didn't see the front page of the Fargo Forum. What was it? The politicians that were recently accused of and for sexual assault.
Yeah, sick. Ray Holmberg you're speaking of.
Yep.
If I had my way, I could tell you what would happen to him.
Yeah, and Minnesota representative.
Yeah, I'd like to know that too. You know, I have a bill right now, 1371, that deals with mandatory minimums for human traffickers. And the reason for that is because a lot of these judges, they're very loose in their sentencing, are letting these horrific crimes that these people commit, they're letting them off with very light sentences. I think Ray Holmberg is facing 3 to 4 years, and this man raped multiple children. He should be facing the gallows, in my opinion.
Yes.
And anybody that was in cahoots with him. Going back to your question about, I think you're referencing 2307 and the obscene materials and libraries, that type of deal. This has happened. And in testimony the other day in Judiciary Committee, we saw some examples of some of these books that are in the children's section. One of these books depicts a scene that's implying oral sex. And this is for kids. So what
I would like to correct you on that because we have that book in the library and I looked at it and it's easy for us as adults to jump to that conclusion, but when you look at the picture, you can see that there's a pillow behind this one guy and his head is not in the other guy's crotch, like I said, because he's sitting up against a pillow and the other guy is sitting up as well. So they're sitting there face to face talking to each other. It's not something I don't believe that our children would jump to, but us as adults who look at things differently because we have that life experience, jump to that conclusion.
Ma'am, you can go back 2 years. I read one of these books on the House floor, and I believe that he was gavelled down because it was considered obscene. And these are books that are in the children's section of some of our libraries, maybe not yours. I think you're doing the right thing for our kids.
What I would like to know is that when Representative Wobbema says that it's up to the parents are the ones who know best what their educational environment should be and where they would be most successful. He leaves that responsibility up to the parents, and he expects the parents to be responsible in paying for their children's lunches. Why aren't the parents responsible for monitoring their children's reading?
So let's put the word nefarious in the context. I believe what I was talking about was under the construct of society, there are people with nefarious intentions in all of society. There are bad legislators, there are bad police officers, there are bad doctors, there are bad taxi drivers, bad mailmen. But they all come from a source in society. So there are people out there with the intention of harming children. Can we agree on that? That's the term that I use in nefarious. That's the context that I use the term nefarious in. So I would just challenge you that if you have no problems and you have no issues, then you have nothing to worry about. The bill, you don't have anything to worry about. But the bill is intended for those who should have something to worry about. And that
You
bill.
put us in a hard place because if you pass this law, we could be, for a book that is very much, there's no definition for what is obscene. So something that was obscene to this person and not to this person, we could get in trouble for giving that person a book.
And then if a child comes and that book is all of a sudden in the locked cabinet, then if they want that book, I can't give them that book. They can go home and talk to their parents and say, the librarian wouldn't check this book out to me. And so the parents can come back and say, you can check this book out to my child. I want them to be able to check it out. And I will have to say, because of the law, no, I can't. And they can go home and get a lawyer and sue me for violating the First Amendment.
Well, let's just admit that that's not likely going to happen. But regardless, I understand that you're in a difficult situation, but there are bad actors out there, and the law is intended to deal with the bad actors. And unfortunately, we have laws that define how we should function and behave in society. And some people have no problems because they behave appropriately. But some people that do have problems are because they don't behave appropriately. So, I'm sorry that you get swept into all of this, but we can't say that a specific library, we can't pinpoint in legislation that a specific library in a specific community needs to do X, Y, or Z without encompassing all of those organizations in that specific sector of society. So if you are doing things appropriately and you're doing things properly, then you have no concerns. I'm not sure what the issue is from that perspective. There are bad actors out there, and they've proven themselves based on the last biennium. When we started this process, the very next day we get these displays in couple of these libraries that said with police caution tape around them saying, be careful, you can't read these books. Those are the nefarious actors out there. By intent are challenging what's appropriate and what shouldn't be appropriate. And so if you're complying with the law, then you have no concerns. You should have no concerns.
So we're gonna.
In addition to Anita's, in addition to being the testing coordinator, I have a master's degree in library science. I had to take numerous classes in curriculum development. And my question is, who is going to determine obscene material? Who's going to make that determination? What is obscene to one is not to the other. Are you guys going to make that when you do not have the
Term obscene
education?
is defined in statute. So
What does the statute say?
I'm not familiar with the precise verbiage of what the statute says, but the term obscene is defined in statute.
Okay, we're gonna go over here on the front.
When you're talking about this library issue, the funding portion of this hasn't been discussed. Is it not? What I understand is it's going to cost about $1 million for the first year to implement age verification, and then about a little less than $1 million annually after that. But yet you want to take $6 million away from PBS, who provides great education materials and programming. You're worried about a budget, but you're going to spend $1 million a year on controlling a library that has a board. No, that has a board. The people should go to the board. The state doesn't need to be spending $1 million and then taking $6 million away from something that is education. That's all I got.
It's for the purposes of protecting children, first of all. And remember that our libraries are actually funded through taxpayer funds as well. There's some donations in there, I understand that, but they're also funded through taxpayer funds, which puts the responsibility of ensuring their operation on the legislature to make sure that when a problem is identified, we're dealing with it. So that's rationale enough to protect the children for $1 million.
Does anyone have a question who has not been able to ask a question yet? Way in the back. I want to try and get to someone who has not had a chance to talk. And then we'll come back over here.
I don't need that.
Okay.
No, you'll hear me, trust me. My name is John Finstad from Lisbon, North Dakota. My wife and I have always trusted the system. And the system has kicked us in the teeth. In 1984, I lobbied for the Bank of North Dakota, beginning farmer loan. When our daughter was killed in a car accident, I lobbied for the seatbelt law. I spoke to just about every school in North Dakota. And when my wife and I wanted to rely on the system, it kicked us in the face. We lost our bank because of Joel Heitkamp and rural water. We wound up with a loan shark. You talk about accountability, and these gentlemen really have been pretty darn good. Give them that credit. But the bottom line in this whole thing is there's a state law that says when a bank has a loan, the bank doesn't have to give you your equity back. Now a certain part of that law has been changed. If you're foreclosed, or a bank takes, or a community takes it for taxes, they have to give you your money back for the difference between what the taxes were and that. We filed bankruptcy for one reason: to preserve $700,000 of equity. And we were with a loan shark out of Britain, South Dakota, a former governor of South Dakota. We filed bankruptcy. We followed all the rules. The deed to our farm was stolen. And as of right now, the Hutterites have bought the farm from that guy, and he made a $3 million profit on the sale of that land. We trusted the system. And I have gone to the legislature, and I am going to turn around and really complain about the legislative council and certain individuals that turn around and don't know shit from Shinola. I've got a bankruptcy judge that says I'm bound by state law. I have the legislative council saying that's federal. What the hell is it? I'm 68 years old and haven't got a dime because I trusted the system. You talk about accountability. I wish I had a problem with paying land taxes. I wish I had that $700,000 to turn around and have a foundation in my daughter's memory. Each and every one of you will be remembered for what you did for others. And as far as the legislative council goes, I have no respect for them because I really, in my heart, believe that they bullied the what's the word for it when you turn around and put a bill in? I think they lobbied real hard, don't do it. And they did it. You talk about accountability. Like I say, we all need to worry about accountability. But in this particular case, there's already 3 farmers that have filed bankruptcy. And there's other people that have filed bankruptcy. They all need to know that a settlement agreement, a contractual agreement put forth by the federal Judge Hastings is not subject to state law. We would have got our money back, at least $700,000, and we would have been able to live the rest eyes out. But the system screwed us. Mike Wobbema called me on the Monday morning and says, John, you know what? I'm busy and everything else, and that's fine, okay? I called another representative who I've gotten to know, and he has 2 attorneys right next to him. And the one guy's wife teaches bankruptcy law, and she says, you know what? It's the federal government. This is a lady that teaches bankruptcy law. And if I were to be to turn around and ask anything of these 3 guys, and when I've called them, they have turned around and been good. I'm not saying that, but the Judiciary Committee needs to turn around and say, what is this? You know, everyone says with a bankruptcy, oh, man, when we filed bankruptcy, everyone said, well, you're just, you know, we owed some people money. Are we going to get our money? You're going to get every dime. Usually it's the creditor that loses the money. Well, this debtor, and they ignored, when we went to the Supreme Court, all they said was, deed in lieu of foreclosure, you lose everything, and our settlement agreement, our bankruptcy agreement, was left untouched. It didn't mean nothing. So like I say, from this person, and like I say, my wife and I have done everything. I had a guy deliver a porta potty at the cemetery. This is kind of out of the subject here. He turned around and looked at me and he said, you're Amy's dad, aren't you? I spoke to his school at Wapaton 23 years ago. And he remembered, he says, I wear my seatbelt all the time. And that's what I want this legislature and these gentlemen to say, you know what? We're going to find out what it is. We need to have it so that there's a clear line here. There's not common jurisdiction. So with that, I apologize for but like I say, being 68 years old, like I said, my wife and I have trusted the system. My wife was retiree of the year. And now I'm living with my father-in-law. Because we have nothing while my wife has her teacher's retirement plan. Try to keep that safe, guys.
Sir, thank you so much for your story and your comments. And I'm going to look at Representative Johnston because I think you are on Judiciary. Are you on Judiciary? Okay, so this is a very tough situation. Is there anything at this point in the legislature that can be done so that this can be corrected, or so that so it doesn't happen again? Is there something, I think you mentioned federal bankruptcy law and the state shouldn't have anything to do with it. So what can be done?
I'm just going to say one thing. You know, Trump is talking about all this stuff and everything else. If we can't hit that defining line and not concurrent jurisdiction, then maybe we need to get rid of the federal bankruptcy system, because I know they got to use state law in property rights and stuff. That's common sense. But the bottom line in the whole thing, if we can't have that black and white jurisdiction, then get rid of the federal bankruptcy system and turn it over to the states, and then you do not have that concurrent jurisdiction.
Yeah, I've had quite a lot of conversations with John, and I feel so bad for him, both with the loss of his daughter and his farm. One of the roadblocks that we've faced, in North Dakota, unlike other states, legislators, we don't have staff. We have something called legislative council, and that's the only thing we have to rely on. There's some other states that the legislators have 10 staff members apiece, and so you have tools in place where you can do a lot of research and get to the bottom of something. We have legislative council, and legislative council is working for everybody. And it was clear that in conversing with legislative council, even a lot of these folks on legislative, they're not experts in bankruptcy, as John found out. And So that's what we were going up against. You know, this is something that could be studied in the interim, and I hope it is something that they take up. But barring that, that needs to be what happens over the next couple of years, so that we could come up with some comprehensive legislation. But like I said, if we did have there was a bill that would authorize us a staff member, and that would be a big help. That would honestly make us a better legislative body and more responsive to the people of North Dakota. It gets to the bottom of some of these problems.
If I could make one suggestion.
Yeah.
Judiciary Committee needs to summon, whatever you want to call it, Judge Hastings, to educate everyone of why this is the way it is in her court, right or wrong. And I don't know if she'd be inclined to do that, but if she really cares about the legal system and the accountability, because she has, I'm sorry, John, I can't help you. I'm sorry, John, I can't help you. So if I was going to make any suggestions, is not to make her accountable, but just have her explain to the Judiciary Committee and what there could possibly be done. You'd think she would want to do that. Maybe not, I don't know, but thank you.
Yeah, and if legislative management decides to study this, to come up with some sort of legislation, they can't subpoena Judge Hastings.
Why not?
But they can ask her to come in and testify and give some feedback. And a lot of times, a lot of these judges and lawyers are pretty good at doing that.
Okay, well, that's a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
That is really tough. And my brain keeps thinking about what can be done yet before the end of the session, even if it's a study. So I don't know. But thank you again for sharing your experience with us. Okay, other questions?
Other question? Okay.
Oh, he's calling time.
Okay, so we're after 11 o'clock. I'll stand here as long as the legislators are willing to sit here and you're wanting to participate. Would you entertain one more question and then you gotta run?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for taking one more. I'm frustrated that the LGBTQ issues keep coming up in our legislature. I want North Dakota to be a welcoming state for all and for everyone to have the rights that they deserve. And just on the way up here from Enderlin, I counted my friends who are in the LGBTQ community who have left North Dakota because they didn't feel welcome. I got up to 12 and I quit counting. So I'm concerned. There's two bills right now. HB 1181 is the gender bill. HB 1144 is the bathroom bill. I'm just urging you to oppose those. And I have a question for Senator Wobbema on the HCR 3013 that opposed same-sex marriage. They asked for a recorded roll call vote, and that was not supported. And if I saw the video right when they asked for 8 senators to stand up to have the recorded vote, I didn't see you stand up. And I'm just wondering why you didn't want the vote recorded, and I'm wondering if you would tell us what your vote was.
I didn't stand because I didn't think it was necessary to expose the rest of the body to the vitriol that we have already received and would have received based on the vote. I believe the vote failed, but if it would have been a recorded roll call vote, there would have been external pressures on a lot of legislators based on their community and those people in their community that would have passed. And so by not having a recorded roll call vote, we kept that off the table. So, and my vote is my vote.
Okay. Senator Wobbema, Representative Kiefert, Representative Johnston, thank you so much for being here and listening. You can tell that there are is a lot of passion in this room. You know, there are things that are near and dear to our hearts. I really appreciate you hanging in there with us, and I really appreciate the turnout that we have at these legislative forums. I just wanted to double check with you. Have your schedules changed at all that would allow you to participate in another forum or not?
Yeah, the schedule's changed. We're busier and busier and busier and busier as we come
Why,
closer.
was that a silly question of me?
Well, it's an unfair question because
Yeah.
we've already had this discussion several times.
Yes, okay, thank you. All right, unless I hear from the other two, I think that's probably the same as what, how you feel. Dwight, any, and then I would just ask for any closing comments that you might have, so.
I just wanted to share that I have a whole page for information on the property tax. If somebody wants a copy, I don't think we can make copies of it here, or you can email me and I can send it back out to you, but it explains every property tax bill and what it does. So if you want that, nothing else, send me an email and I'll shoot it back to you.
Okay. Anyone else, any closing comments or anything from you? Again, thank you very much for your time here this morning. You've been very gracious. And thank you very much to the audience. We really appreciate it. And please stay in touch and follow the rest of the session and look for any additional information from the League of Women Voters and our organization's partner organization. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.